Storming Bracket!
What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is of course part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's work from worst to best. Done such directors in the past such as David Lynch, David Fincher, Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, the list goes on. But you guys clicked on this video, so you know this time around I'm focusing on Richard Linklater's films and ranking them from worst to best. Now, as of the filming of this video, which is of course February 2022, Richard Linklater has done 19 films. This is not including any music videos, TV shows, documentaries, none of that, just specifically feature-length films. So he's done 19, so I'll be ranking them from 19 being his worst to number 1 being his best, and of course my opinion. I will be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on your ranking for his work down below, so let me know down below. But anyways, guys, enough exposition, let's get started. So kicking things off, we have number 19, which is me and Orson Welles. Fine performances, but besides that, honestly, there's not much to this movie. It wasn't necessarily disappointing, but it wasn't really something that resonated with me personally, which is a shame because I do really quite like Orson Welles. But yeah, wasn't too big of a fan of this movie, unfortunately, which is why it's number 19. Next up, number 18, we have Bad News Bear. This movie had its moments. It was funny. Billy Bob Thornton was, of course, really good, per usual. But there really isn't much to this movie. I had a good time with it, for sure, to an extent. But it is a movie that I also know is kind of slight and at the same time pretty forgettable because I find myself here just talking about it right now, vaguely remembering bits and pieces. But this is a movie that really doesn't stick with you, unfortunately, and is why it's number 18. Next up, number 17, we have Waking Life. I really like the style of this movie. I really liked the voice acting. But unfortunately, this is a movie that's similar to Bad News Bear. I found it to be kind of slight. By no means are these two movies very similar. They're just two movies that I kind of feel similar towards, where it's like I respect certain aspects, but as a whole, it doesn't really resonate with me personally. That's why for this one is number 17. Next up, we have number 16, which is Fast Food Nation. This is a movie based on the premise alone is one that really should have resonated with me and should have been something that I really was fascinated by. But unfortunately, I liked the directing of Linklater here, but besides that and the performances, there wasn't really much for me to grasp on with, unfortunately. I felt very distant to this movie, which is a shame because, again, as I mentioned earlier, it is something that is quite fascinating in terms of the premise itself. But just the execution left a lot to be desired, and is why it's number 16. Next up, number 15, this is Slacker. So this was obviously the debut film of Linklater. It's the one that put him on the map. I respect the fact that it's a movie that was very low budget and again was something that was part of that new wave of filmmaking. But unfortunately, I just wasn't really able to connect to really anything. It's one of those movies I respect more than I actually enjoyed, if that makes sense. Like, it's a slice of life movie. I appreciate the fact that it was the movie that got Linklater on the map, but it's a movie that unfortunately I just wasn't able to really grasp onto anything, and it's why it's my number 15. Next up, number 14 is Suburbia. This is a movie that I did actually grasp onto a bit more. I liked the characters. I liked the whole premise of the fact that these characters are just out of high school and everything. It gave sort of a relevance to it, if you will, something that I feel like is kind of timeless. But unfortunately, by the third act, I will say that that timeless feel to it is still there, but I do think that certain events happen just because. It just was something that almost felt like it was a slice of life approach, and then towards the end, it felt like something had to happen, so that way there was more stakes. But unfortunately, it just didn't fully work for me personally. But it is a film that I would definitely say is worth your time. It is kind of hard to track down, at least as of the filming this video, but I managed to track it down, and yeah, it's my number 14. Next up, my number 13 is Where Did You Go Bernadette? This is a movie I saw in theaters. I actually enjoyed it. It's nothing really memorable per se, but Cate Blanchett is really good, and I did have fun with it, and I think that the message itself is something that is interesting. It's been done before, but it is interesting to say the least. Yeah, it's an okay movie, and that's why it's my number 13. Next up, my number 12 is Newton Boys. This is a movie I should have loved. I really should have. I love the cast members, especially Ethan Hawke. But to be quite honest with you, this is a very low-stake movie when it really shouldn't be, given the fact that these are a bunch of bank robbers. But I will say that the production design, the meticulous nature of this movie really kind of integrated into the time period was something that I did quite appreciate. And I do like the performances, but it's a movie that it's not really going to honestly be remembered for me personally in a couple of days. I did just watch this. This was the movie that I finished and was able to say, hey, I finally seen all of Linklater's movies. But besides that, there's not much to this movie that I'll remember other than it could have been a bit more than what it was. But as it is, it's just okay. Next up, we have, obviously that was my number 12. Next up, my number 11 is Last Flag Flying. This is a movie that I really like the themes. I really like the chemistry between the actors. The three main actors are really good. Bryan Cranston in particular, I think, does an excellent job. Per usual, it goes without saying. But this is a movie that I feel like veterans in particular will really be able to resonate. I appreciate this movie. I didn't love it. I think it is a one-time watch. But it is a movie that I am glad I finally got to see. And yeah, that's why it's my number 11. Next up, my number 10. This is a love it or hate it type movie. Now, my number 10 is Tape. Tape stars Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. And this is a movie that, really good dialogue, in my opinion. The actual cinematography is kind of iffy because of, the technology that they use in terms of camcorders and everything. But I really like the dialogue. I like the acting. It's a movie that's a one-setting location type deal where it's like, I think, 80 minutes long. But again, the dialogue is quite engaging. This is the Linklater that I personally like. The Linklater that's able to have it where it's like, you're engaged because of the dialogue and the acting. And this movie definitely adheres to that. But I also see it being a movie that isn't for everyone because of that one setting premise, as well as some of the things that happen towards the end. But still, I personally like this movie quite a bit, and that's why it is my number 10. Next up, my number 9 is A Scanner Darkly. This is a movie that's similar to Waking Life. It's very stylistic in terms of the animation, and that's why I really like this movie. I like it better than Waking Life, particularly because of it being more of a noir. And the noir aspects, I think, are really well done. And I think that this is a movie that I could definitely see myself probably revisiting at some point in the future because I do think that it is very unique and very fresh vision. I think I might not have been in the right mindset when I watched this, so I do want to revisit at some point. But, as it stands, it's a movie that I do look back at it fondly when I saw it like a year or so ago. And I did quite like it. And that's why it is, of course, my number 9. Next up, my number 8 is Everybody Wants Some. I did see this in theaters. It's a throwback movie. It is a very laid-back movie. It's very, very enjoyable. Rewatchability, I don't really know if it's there, but I will say I did quite enjoy it, and I found it to be very relaxing. And at the same time, very good dialogue, very good performances, good filmmaking. It's got everything. It's a good movie. Not amazing, but it is still good, and that is why it is my number 8. Next up, my number 7, School of Rock. Jack Black kills in this movie. Funny, heartfelt. Doesn't get much better than this in terms of those type of movies that's inspirational, especially if you're a teacher. If you're a teacher out there, I would definitely say watch School of Rock if you haven't done so already, because this is definitely a movie that's pro-teacher in the best of ways. And yeah, that's my number 7. Next up, my number 6 is, speaking of Jack Black, my number 6 is Bernie. This is a movie go into knowing as little as possible, and you will be quite surprised. I found this movie to be quite hilarious, but also the drama that is there is also really good. Jack Black gives a great performance. Very underrated movie, very underlooked. I already want to revisit. This is a good movie. Definitely check it out if you haven't done so already. But yeah, that's my number 6. My number 5 is the movie that many people will probably have as their number 1. But for me, I like it. My number 5 is Dazed and Confused. So Everybody Wants Some kind of feels like a sequel to Dazed and Confused. Dazed and Confused is really good. It's a really, really good movie. Again, it's got all the goods on what you expect with the Linklater movie. Engaging dialogue, great characters. Honestly, laid back, slice of life type of approach in terms of that storytelling and the pacing. It's really, really good. I really like this movie, but there were 4 other movies I liked better. But yeah, again, I understand if you have this as your number 1, but for me personally, again, it's my number 5. Next up, my number 4, we have, let's get this out. My number 4 is Before Sunset, which is the second chapter in the Before trilogy. I really like this movie. I love it. It's very short. It's 80 minutes. It's a good middle chapter. If you haven't seen the Before trilogy, definitely do so. But yeah, this is my number 4. Next up, my number 3 is Boyhood. This movie, when I saw it in theaters 8 years ago, really honestly changed my life. I loved this movie. Great, perfect timing, honestly, when I watched this movie. Slice of life approach filmmaking, per usual in terms of Linklater. Sweet spot. Great stuff. Arquette. Hawke, they do a great job of supporting characters. Ethan Hawke in particular, man, holy cow, what an actor. He's great. I love the fact that him and Linklater work all the time together, but Boyhood, this is really good. I personally really like it. It's not a movie that I revisit a lot. I haven't revisited it actually in like 4 or 5 years, but I am planning to revisit it shortly. I really like this movie though. It's long, but it's very much so well worth your time and definitely deserves that Best Picture nomination that it received. But yeah, really good movie. And that is why it's my number 3. Next up, my number 2 is Before Sunrise. So this is the first of the Before trilogy. This movie is an incredible romance. This is a movie going to knowing as little as possible. I didn't know anything about it, honestly, the first time I saw it. But you'll be really, really surprised, I think, by just the chemistry between the two actors and the dialogue. The dialogue, oh my goodness, it is so good. So good. But yeah, it's my number 2. Next up, my number 1. May as well pull it out. My number 1 is Before Midnight. I love this film. Not only does it honestly serve as an incredible third chapter of this trilogy, but a satisfying way of ending this series. As of right now, who knows, maybe we'll get another chapter, but for now, it feels like it's the movie that will end the franchise. It's great, though. I love this movie. Absolutely love it. One of my favorite romances. It's tough to watch, though, because, again, this is a couple that's been together for a long time. So, obviously, when that happens, things can happen. Arguments can ensue, and we get to see that. And honestly, feels very raw in the best of ways. I think that this is the movie that Linklater really perfected his formula of filmmaking on having that slice of life approach of directing, dialogue, and acting, and everything comes together perfectly in this film. Love it, love it, love it. That's why it's my number 1. But yeah, guys, those are my thoughts on Linklater, his 19 films. Again, didn't go in depth, but those are my ranking for his movies. Now, I do like to talk a little bit about the director himself. In terms of, obviously, my ranking videos. So, Linklater, I think that he can be hit or miss, but when he's a hit, he does such a great job, again, at delivering dialogue, directing, and naturalistic approach to filmmaking, such as cinematography, soundtrack choices. He really knows how to, honestly, emphasize certain things in his films, and I think that he's a really talented director. I'm looking forward to his next movie. I believe it's called Apollo 11 and a half, something like that. It's coming out on Netflix, so I'm going to try to get this video out to you guys before that, movie comes out. But yeah, he's a very talented director. Anytime something comes out of his, I will be there day one. No question about it. But yeah, Linklater, guys. Let me know your thoughts on his films down below. What's your ranking of his movies? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, with the subscription, notification bell, and I'll get you guys later.